How do you buy guidance for your children? Someone here all the time. Someone around who cares. What do? Advertise? Wanted. Some kind, gentle soul who will care.
Hello, and welcome to the Twilight Pwn, the internet's third most popular Twilight Zone podcast. My name is John. I'm joined by my co-host Fred.
Hello.
How are you doing this week, Fred?
I'm good. I'm maybe doing even extra special good because about 20 minutes ago I got a text from you saying like, "Love you, honey," or whatever. It was just an interesting glimpse. I assume you were texting
Pull
Mrs.
back the
John.
current. Yes.
But yeah, it's always kind of weird to because as you've said, you're not like the most like cuddly, affectionate of gents. It was quite the shock to see like, "Good night kisses, dear sweet." I mean, it actually was a lot more.
And I want to jump in
and
be like, those goodnight kisses were for the child, Fred, and you know that. Don't make me look like an idiot.
That's true. An idiot who wishes his wife a good night with a kiss. It is true. The affection was reserved for the child.
Let's all just be very clear about
the relationship with the wife was businesslike and directed towards the child. How are you doing this week, Sean?
I'm doing fine. I know last week we did Valley of the Shadow, and in church this week they read Psalm 23, which is the Valley of the Shadow psalm. So I felt a little main theme season 2 music queuing up, as we call it.
Did you bring up the particle deaccelerator and the?
No, but they did have ham sandwiches right after.
Oh, nice, perfect.
It's delicious.
Perfect. Makes perfect sense. Cool. What are we doing this week?
This week we are discussing I Sing the Body Electric, a third season episode, the 100th of the production run. It aired originally on May 18th, 1962.
They make a fairly convincing pitch here. It doesn't seem possible, though, to find a woman who must be 10 times better than Mother in order to seem half as good. Except, of course, in the Twilight Zone.
You can sense the grin in that audio. We make a pretty convincing pitch.
I think isn't that one where he's sitting at the desk and he's like totally smoking a cigarette?
Yes.
Like he's kind of like, "Step into my office."
Yeah. Well, he's kind of
fired.
Like, he's got his feet up on the desk and is like drinking the guy's scotch. Mm-hmm. Your ass is grass in the Twilight Zone. We like to write our own Serling style intros. I don't know if I'll be able to top my quite. Of the moment Coolio parody of last week, but I don't know. I guess I went first, so why don't you?
All right, I'll do my Tone Loc parody.
Sweet.
It's gonna kill.
Oh, by the way, did you know Tone Loc was a voice in the movie Fern Gully?
No, but I know he did some acting, around that time. So I guess it's not shocking. I just didn't know that specifically.
Yeah, I was on at a bar, and for some reason I don't know, it was some weird bar that had Fern Gully on, and at the end. The 3 credits that appear after the main actors are Tommy Chong, Cheech Marin, and Tone Loc. I was just like, that is quite the cast.
Interesting. It could be a good get.
Exactly. Maybe we'll contact his people for the podcast. All right, go.
If I were to tell you a tale of a grandma with gears, you would most assuredly understand it to be a fiction, a fantasy, a fable. Of course you would be right. A tale of a mechanized Meemaw is nothing more than a fable, really. But is it? Who's to say a robotic Rue McClanahan type couldn't happen? Sure, it could happen in a fable, which this is, but nanotech nanas could also happen in the real world, which this might be, assuming, of course, that it isn't a fable, which it is. Fable? Sure. Why not? It's not a fable. The Twilight Zone.
That was good.
Might not make sense for people who haven't heard his closing yet. But,
no.
In about an hour, that's going to kill for
exactly. Yeah, we'll hopefully get the retroactive laugh on that one. Mm-hmm. But I do think that that's a very common thing that Serling does at the end. It's like, could it happen? Who knows? But this is the Twilight Zone. All right. Family scene. Daytime. 3 children on a staircase listening in on their annual performance review. And sweet Anne would be passing with flying colors if she didn't have the annoying habit of feeling sad about her mother dying last weekend. What is to be done? The suggestion that father should provide nurturing and emotional support is tossed into the ring, and when the laughter dies down, Tommy, sweet Tommy, suggests a reasonable plan, responding to an ad in the back of a comic book for a robotic woman. It's a suggestion that even third child, sweet third child, can get behind. A suggestion straight from the judgmental online parenting message boards of the Twilight Zone.
Nice.
So, this is a episode from a season of the
Third
Twilight
season.
A third season episode. So you can check it out if you want to before we get going with the plot. It's on Netflix and Hulu, and of course buy the DVDs and Blu-rays. Faux show. Because we're about to spoil... To call it a plot is slightly generous. Yeah. I don't know. We're about to spoil the things that the actors say.
I feel like it should be said just right out of the gate, because I feel like it might come up in the discussion throughout, that this is the only episode of The Twilight Zone that was written by Mr. Ray Bradbury, who was obviously a huge influence on The Twilight Zone, kind of in its gestation, and on the writers who wrote for it, but he himself only had this single episode produced. He wrote a couple others that were not produced. In discussing this, we'll maybe kind of work out possibly why he had some trouble with the other episodes. But
yeah. So we open up on three charming little Muppets sneaking down...
doing their Sound of Music routine.
Kind of. I was about to say Mary Poppins, but yeah.
Oh, yes.
Either way. They're sneaking down from doing their homework and drinking their Ovaltine, and they're overhearing a conversation between their father. A listener pointed out that the father, hot or not, looks like Walt Disney, which I think was pretty accurate. It was Ashley. Well, it was Ashley. I'm not gonna out her last name on the podcast, but Ashley suggested that the father looked like Walt Disney, and I think he's kind of a dead ringer for him. You don't think so?
Did our listener provide photographic evidence?
Oh, you don't know what Walt Disney looks like?
No. If only there was if only I had Kruger here to help me out.
If only there was some machine.
Yeah. Sure.
Anyway, Walt Dadsley is having a chat with the kid's aunt. It was kind of unclear whether it was on the mother's side or the father's side. What do you think of that?
I think that's something that the TZ fans have been debating for decades.
It's the Kirk versus Picard of the Twilight Zone.
I would guess it was a paternal aunt.
Yeah.
With the way she talks to him. Yes. I feel like that's kind of a brother-sister kind of. If it were a sister-in-law, you'd think there might be a little bit more reserved or cordial. I don't know.
But she's not very reserved at all. And it's weird. She's not like, I feel so sorry for those kids because their mother died, which is what we learned. She's like, those kids are so unfocused. Like, how focused is a 5-year-old anyway?
Right.
What the hell? As the aunt leaves, she sees that the children have heard her kind of poning them. But she really doesn't pull back at all. She's just kind of like, you poor, unhappy, unfocused children. And then leaves. It's like horrible.
It was a simpler time, Frank.
True. It was a meaner time. The problem, of course, is that they can't find a good babysitter, and they're talking.
It's got a real Full House pilot feel to this episode.
Kind of does, yeah.
They're gonna call Uncle Joey any minute here.
Yeah, well, kind of, or maybe like the beginning of Mrs. Doubtfire or something.
That was my other one. I did feel like at certain moments I was just waiting for "Dude Looks Like a Lady" to kick in.
Exactly. I am Job. They're talking about how the nannies that they've had are of substandard quality. The kid, little Tommy, busts out with a great and utterly insane idea, which is an advertisement in the back of a magazine called Modern Science.
Listen to this. I sing the body electric.
What does that mean?
Sing the body electric is the motto of Facsimile Limited.
I sing the body electric. Let me see that, Tom. Inventors and makers of electrical shadows, effigies, mimics, mannequins, fettuccine. To parents who worry about inadequate nurses in schools, who are concerned with the moral and social development of their children, we have perfected an electronic data processing system.
An electric... Well, what does that mean, Daddy?
Electronic data processing system. In the shape of an elderly woman built...
A woman?
Yeah, sort of a robot.
Yeah. Dude looks like a lady.
It's like, I sing the body electric. And everyone's like, I sing the body electric?
I sing the body
electric.
What a great title.
Yeah, exactly.
How imaginative. It evokes something.
Yeah, well, like, would like a 8-year-old child be so charmed by like a Walt Whitman reference or something like that? It's very weird. Yeah. Just something about how the father is like so willing to entertain this idea from the back of a comic book is just It just gives the episode such a weird tone right off the bat.
It really does call to mind the idea of like a Russian mail order bride.
Yeah,
Just like a couple degrees to the side of that.
Yeah.
Like, I guess it's okay because it's a robot granny
And they very
instead of a
specifically say
robot
elderly.
wife. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Don't worry. She's not going to be hot.
Yeah.
We've programmed her to not be too hot.
Yeah. 6 at best. Just something about the dad's enthusiasm, It's like, you kids aren't getting enough exercise. Oh, look at this ad in the back of a bodybuilding magazine for, like, this powder. Like, it's so creepy in a weird way. I don't know.
Can we mention a kind of reverse hot or not? Or, I don't know exactly how to phrase this.
A not or hot?
Yeah, not or hot.
Okay.
Our
first.
The guy's children and the guy. Like,
Yes,
all the children
true.
do not look anything like the man in, like, looks.
True.
They're not age appropriate for him.
Yes,
like,
yeah.
I did not buy that this man had those 3 children.
No,
but-
true. It's like Yao Ming, and it's just a strange fit. I mean, it's not that he's...
As, like, employees at his factory, yeah,
Sure,
I could see that. But
Yeah, I don't know. The kids are like maybe 5, 7, and 10 or something like
Yeah.
that ish, and the father is like 82 or something. So, but he does seem rich. So maybe he's one of these guys who like
yeah, maybe it's like a Different Strokes Conrad Bain situation, or there was a time when men were older too.
True. Let's put that aside for now. Put a pin in it. And head on over to Facsimile Limited. And it's like a nice, weird German expressionist warehouse, like very dark space, with a weird butler who emerges from the darkness to show them a bunch of harvested organs. It's cool. The production design is cool. Like, it's very dark, and there are these tables that are spotlit with, like, arms and eyes and stuff. But it's
Yeah.
also quite creepy.
There's a weird juxtaposition of the sentimental music, which
Yeah.
they're riding hard, and
Yeah.
then this, like, Cronenberg Eraserhead moment. Just like well-lit body parts hung on walls.
Yeah, and it's like, oh yeah, you just grab all these body parts and throw them down that garbage chute, and we jam them
Yeah.
together. Like, and it's just like twinkle, twinkle, twinkle.
Yeah, it's like, couldn't we just, have a nice, well put together little book, and we just point to the options we like. We don't have to rip limbs and throw them down like a chute.
It's so
Seems
undignified.
evocative of an incinerator chute.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's just like a bunch of underpaid migrant workers in the basement who just like
Just
staple all
assembling
these body parts
grandmas.
together. Yeah. And we have another example of this. The trade-ins has like kind of, there's a nice showroom where
But
you can,
that
you know,
one,
that was classy.
which do you like better? Do you like having they put it together for you, or do you like having it fully customizable, like over at Facsimile?
Facsimile, it's like the level of customization is too much. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like
kind of like
it's like you don't want to
how
have
the
to like
sausage is made.
Yeah, exactly. You don't
I
have
don't
to
wanna
pick
know
out
what
your
parts my
grandma's
grandma's
spleen.
made of.
Yeah, exactly. It's odd.
Like, give me eye color, hair.
Yeah,
Like basics.
like
basics.
video-
I don't need to pick out, the eyeball itself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I don't know. My note for this was just, what the f***?
So, there you go. Yeah, I mean, I had like more variations on it, but that's basically kind of what it comes down to.
And everyone's pretty on board with this.
Except for Anne, the oldest daughter, and she kind of misses her mom, so she has some slight.
Yeah, or she's just a normal human
Yeah,
being.
true.
So she has the slightest reservations about this
Yeah.
Build-A-Bear workshop.
Yeah. My other note was, did you catch Robbie in the background of the scene, kind of like building a pervy robot? He's got like a trench coat on. And he's like, yeah. Anyway, they toss a bunch of crap down the chute. It's gonna turn into their grandma.
Whenever my kid's old enough to, kind of start wondering where people come from, I think I'll just show her this episode.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
that's more or less it.
Yeah, In the next scene, it's a normal weekday, and the 3 kids are all at home, unattended, in the garden, just by themselves. And Robo Mary Poppins arrives at the house, and then starts ingratiating herself with the kids by mainly like prop comedy joke.
Yeah, I've got a couple clips. So the first thing they got to do is they got to name her.
Yeah.
So
Who are you? Give me any name. Melissa, Lavinia, Melvina. What would you like?
Grandma.
Say it a few times. It'll sound fine.
it starts off okay, and then she throw out a couple witch names. Feels like she's like Melissa or Lavinia or Naveen. Like, I don't know.
I don't know.
Maybe
Elvira.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's not my first or third choice for a granny, but
I was more put off by like how she was like, say it a few times. It'll slowly like worm its way into your consciousness, and you'll come to accept me.
Things aren't going so hot, so she figures she'll hit him with a real corker about being wound up with a key.
You don't wind robots up. They run on electricity.
Yeah, it's like first date laughter.
That doesn't play as well as just a clip, but hearing the kids try and do a friendly laugh and then just her stare them down for a bit before like engage polite laughter.
It has a real like insanity to it. They're just all like, what are we laughing at? Anyway, they don't believe she's a robot, but she proves she's a robot by flying a kite.
Flying!
What did you say my name was?
Grandma!
I feel like that has a real Breaking Bad vibe to it. Say my name. Grandma.
And by the end of the scene, the little suckers are calling her Grandma, except for Anne, who is potentially the most unfocused of the children anyway, so who cares? Did you notice how, like, the sentimental music basically just doesn't let up the entire way through? Like, I've noticed every clip you've played has had, like, a music box playing on top of it.
Well, you know what a sucker I am for the sentimental episodes, so I noticed, but it's hard to enjoy a sentimental episode where you incorporate, limb tossing and threatening robots.
Yeah, it's just, it backfires in a weird way. It feels, like, oppressive, you know what I mean? It's like, there's nothing sadder than, like, at a wedding when no one's dancing and the DJ throws on a real, like, dance hit and still no one dances. That's just the worst. When he throws on Crazy in Love and no one gets out there. Apparently everyone's getting along really well with Robo-grandma except for that little witch Anne. Who just won't accept the death of her mother and the superiority of a robotic replacement.
And we've got a clip here. I thought this was a pretty interesting clip because I think it's a good example of Bradbury dialogue. We talk a lot about Serling dialogue, and this is, I don't know, let's just listen to it and maybe have a quick convo.
You see, Mr. Rogers, children are the most complicated things in the world. I could be the greatest cook in the world, the finest, most exciting playmate, the most incredibly interesting companion. But those are very tiny niches. A shelf in the stomach, a small ledge in the brain. It's the heart I have to enter, the child's heart. And this is a deep place, difficult to reach. But that too will come.
It caught my ear because it's overwritten or it's very stylized, but it didn't sound like Serling overwritten. It is, and I've read a lot of Ray Bradbury. Like, that sounds very much just like a passage from his prose.
Well, I mean, I think we'll talk about this more, but so much of the dialogue I feel like probably would look okay on the page. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like how your eye reading dialogue in a story doesn't necessarily think about the way a person might say it out loud. You kind of accept a greater, like, level of elevation and, definitely a better organization of thoughts, as you and I know from having edited this podcast for what seems like 100 years. Certainly people don't speak eloquently naturally, so I think it's like the kind of thing like that a real prose writer would write,
Yeah, and I could totally see that passage being part of the prose text, like not even a dialogue bit. I could see it just being a little interlude as it's weaving through the stuff. Yeah. In fact, I probably got a copy of that short story lying around here somewhere, so I'll try and track it down and see. But I don't know. I just thought it was a nice comparison of two different kinds of purple prose.
Yeah, exactly. But even though Robo-grandma has a nice 3-point plan to break Anne's spirit down, she's not buying it. Even when, like, Robo-grandma is like, I can even love, like, it's another piece of the creepy puzzle. But anyway, Anne's not buying it, and that's the central conflict of this episode. At some point, she decides to make good on her reservations and runs away. And Anne makes it down to the town square where it seems like every Twilight Zone episode is filmed. Robo-grandma and Anne exchange some heart-wrenching dialogue that I feel like I totally forget.
This is kind of the ordinary people breakthrough moment here.
Your mother.
I hate her.
Why do you hate her, Anne?
Because she lied. She said she loved me.
Didn't she?
She ran away.
Ran away?
She left me.
You mean she died?
No.
You mean she died?
Yes.
Really rubbing it in her face there. I don't know. Did you also notice that bit where like Robo-grandma like replayed like Anne's words through her own hands?
I didn't know what she was trying to accomplish with that, other than freaking out the kids more. But sure,
it was almost like if like you say something insulting to someone and they just like record it in their head and they're like, okay, I'm going to bring that out later when I save your life, and you're going to feel really bad.
It's like a super advanced grandma or mom technique.
Yeah,
it's like most of them just kind of have to remember that stuff. But
exactly. She's literally recording everything you say to use it as a weapon of guilt, and bolts for it and runs right into the path of an oncoming car. Thankfully, Robo-grandma dashes over there herself on her robo legs and pushes Anne out of the way and gets hit herself. And as the whole family is crying on the park bench and mourning the death of Robo-mom, they see that she had an airbag built in and she's okay.
Did you think it was a little weird that they didn't include an impact sound on the van? Like, I don't know. It was slightly confusing if the grandma actually got hit or not. And then when the grandma, like, started getting up, there was a real T-1000 vibe coming out of her.
Yeah, I do like your kind of like, I wanted to hear that robot hit the pavement. I wanted to hear that old bag go down.
I want to hear that mixture of rubber and metal crunch that I love so well.
But you're right. When she gets up, there's very much like you think she's dead, and then like one finger moves, and then she like grins horribly. Like, it's definitely
it's definitely like a Halloween / Terminator vibe to it all.
It's like when they zoom in on the villain, and then like their eyes open, and then they,
exactly
that kind of vibe. We get like a little lesson about how humans will let you down by dying, but Robo-mom will never die, which is apparently good. The values of this episode are just so confusing to me.
Sure.
I don't understand like what we're supposed to be viewing with ironic distance or what we're supposed to be taking at face value. But thankfully the episode launches into a nice little montage.
To sort things out a little better, we get one of the rare Serling mid-tros, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
As of this moment, the wonderful electric grandmother moved into the lives of children and father. She became integral and important. She became of the essence. As of this moment, they would never see lightning, never hear poetry read, never listen to foreign tongues without thinking of her. Everything they would ever see, hear, taste, feel would remind them of her. She was all life, and all life was wondrous, quick, electrical, like Grandma.
It's like Serling reading another writer's work in his own tone of voice. It just kind of feels weird in a strange way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a very Ray Bradburyan thing to write, and it's like Serling's trying to put his own like cadence on it, and it just sounds weird.
It sounds not unlike when we try and do Serling every week. There's definitely like a mealy-mouthed quality to it.
Good point. Eventually they're all grown up, and it's time for Robo-mom to leave because apparently all the kids are going to college at the same time, even though they're different ages.
Sure.
I'll go back to facsimile limited. I sing the body electric. And be sent out to help raise another family like yourselves, or perhaps I'll be taken apart, redistributed.
They won't destroy you.
Oh, no, darling. My mind, my soul, you might say, will go for a while into a room of voices.
A room of voices?
A great dim room where the minds and souls of all the other mechanical grandmothers are brought and stored for a month or a year.
From Grandma.
And in that room, we'll talk to each other, and we'll tell what we learned from the world.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it keeps going. Let's just let her finish it off, because her theology is interesting.
And someday...
Someday what, Grandma?
For a reasonable creature, I have an unreasonable dream. Someday, after 300 years... if I'm very wise and very good, perhaps I'll gain the greatest gift of all, life.
Oh, Grandma, you don't have to wait. You've always been alive to us.
I love just like the music supervisor being like, I guess I'll put sentimental music here.
Yeah.
Sounds like there should be, even though what she's saying is utterly insane.
Is it just a sly commentary on humans' view of the afterlife and how nutty that is? Because it all just, I don't know, It just makes me feel even worse for the grandma as she's like, no, things are going to be great. I'm going to sit in a dark room. Well, my consciousness will. And I don't know.
Yeah, it seems.
I think it's supposed to charm us and like make us feel good, and it just makes me feel worse and worse for her as she continues.
It's like they're gonna rip my body apart to make other grandmas. I don't know. It's like a strange combination too of like science fiction and like sort of fanciful, whimsical abstraction. There's a room of voices where my neural processor will be broken down.
Right.
Like it's like she's speaking in metaphor, but it's about something very science fiction-y. Do you feel like these kids, when they go up to college, are going to be kids who like were raised in a cult and like they're not going to be able to socialize well with other kids?
I think this might be more traumatic to them long term than their mom dying. I don't know.
Yeah, call me crazy. Anyway,
it does make me think of the British sci-fi show I like a lot, Red Dwarf. There's a bit where one of the characters is a robot who comes to the end of his life cycle, and he's totally content with it all because he's been programmed to believe in Silicon Heaven, the like robot afterlife. And the episode ends up kind of being a critique of religion in general. And so then I start thinking like, is there any way this episode's trying to do that? And I don't think.
No,
it's definitely not. It's
not. I actually think it's in a way the opposite. I read a couple interviews with Bradbury, and he talks about how like this had like a Christian. I mean, he was a.
I think it is. Yeah, it's trying to affirm and.
In a very, very vague way.
And it's a very humanist view of the world. Like all robots just really want to be people. I mean,
is that humanist? Is that more robotist?
I guess what is
optimistic.
I meant to say like it's like an ethnocentric view of things. Like it's putting a human feeling on a robot where they might be like, "Hey, I'm good."
And what does Serling have to say about this whole thing in his second outro?
A fable, most assuredly. But who's to say at some distant moment there might be an assembly line producing a gentle product in the form of a grandmother, whose stock in trade is love. Fable, sure. But who's to say?
It is one of the most internally conflicted outros ever. You get the feeling of like a big chalkboard that has like fable written and crossed off and fable with a question mark then crossed off. Is it a fable? Most assuredly, yes. Is it kind of a fable? Maybe.
But it's fably, but you know.
Fable,
it's fably.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very weird episode. It very much doesn't feel like the Twilight Zone, and in a different way than other episodes that don't feel like the Twilight Zone. You know, it's very sentimental, and it's odd because it's a sentimental idea put on something that's usually like a cautionary tale. Like usually when there are robots who try to take the place of humans, we view that as like, that's not good. So I think our brains are conditioned to think like a robot taking over someone's grandma, that's obviously going to be horrible. It's like a marketing video made by the people who make these grandmas, you know what I mean?
Yeah. The Twilight Zone did already have episodes that were a little more nuanced, like The Lonely.
Yeah.
He does come to love a robot, and the robot is, I don't know, not just out to eat his brains or whatever.
True.
But
that had more nuance to it because it's like other people didn't accept it, and he did.
Certainly.
And I think that like this episode is just pure like everyone thinks it's great. You know, your mom went off to a farm. Well, she'll be happier, and we got you a new mom. Like, it's just very weird.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it doesn't feel like a Twilight Zone episode at all. It's not necessarily the content or the tone or anything. Like, they've done sentimental episodes. I think it's just the structure. It doesn't feel like a story.
Exactly,
It feels like kind of a situation. Like, the plot is so spread thin.
Yeah.
Basically, the plot is they get the grandma, and the grandma has to win over the one resistant girl.
Yeah.
And there's like this suggestion that like emotional moment with the girl is kind of like her Goodwill Hunting, it's not your fault breakdown, but it doesn't pay off right. And so, I don't know. It does end up feeling, like you said, more like a pitch for the, you know, how great these robots are than like a real dramatic story.
Yeah, and it's like in a weird way, like her being a robot is almost like not really relevant to the, like, imagine if it was just like her stepmom. You'd basically have the same plot. You know, at that point we hadn't even agreed on robot versus robot. So I think that like certainly, and there's even within the episode there's a little bit of difference there.
Yeah.
I think certainly like you would have gotten more points at the time out of that. But even so, you're right. It's not a story. I mean,
it's like a sketch. It's the barest hint of a story, and it feels like it tries to cover the fact that it's not a story by doing a passage of time, which feels utterly unnecessary. It's like, I called it Serling's mid-tro, but it's like a midpoint narration that comes 2.5 or 3 minutes before the end, so it's really just kind of like let me just kind of get you up to speed to what the hell's going on here, because we wouldn't normally do this.
I think what the message of the story is supposed to be is like, this is a time in history when machines were becoming, more part of people's lives, and you could start imagining a future that's more and more dominated by technology. And I think there was a lot of like techno fear at the time, as is, there's a lot of Twilight Zone episodes about it. And I think this is kind of Bradbury's like, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, machine, we can make machines good just as we can make machines evil. They're products of human thought. And I think that that's like not a bad idea, but this episode just doesn't really explore it in a nuanced way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like I really get a great vibe off the grandma as being like this wonderful woman that they make her out to be, other than the kids are all like, you are great, we love you, you're alive. Like,
it's like her value system is very weird when she has that like come to Jesus moment with Anne. It's like, your mother died, I'm not gonna die, I'm gonna go to a room of voices, here's a recording of you saying you hated me, your mother ran away, she died, let me teach you French.
What we doing next?
Bios and trivia. Bios and trivia. Bios and trivia. Yeah. Scott, Zickery, Martin Grams Jr., Zickery and Grams, and IMDb.
In 1982, the hour-long NBC television movie The Electric Grandmother was released, which was also based on this short story.
Well, let's roll that back a little bit. This teleplay for this episode became the basis for a Ray Bradbury short story that he wrote after. And then he wrote The Electric Grandma after the short story. So it's kind of a weird progression of like Twilight Zone screenplay, short story, Electric Grandma screenplay.
Which is kind of like Something Wicked This Way Comes too, which originally, if I'm getting the timeline right, I think he wrote it as a screenplay, couldn't get it made, rewrote it as a book. Then people liked the book well enough that they were like, let's make a movie out of this. So he then wrote a screenplay more or less based off the book that had been a screenplay. So yeah, kind of a tortured history.
It's kind of like the path of Gremlins, Gremlins 2, Gremlins 2 the new batch novelization. It's a really classic literary path. I read both the short story and watched part of The Electric Grandma, and I was really expecting the short story to kind of like thicken it out in an interesting way, or like be more consistent in terms of like the tone, because the episode is like, is this a fable or not, or like as Serling
Fred, it's a fable.
Unless
but
it's
I
not.
mean, could it be? Could be.
Exactly.
Maybe one day. But Fred, it's a fable. More or less,
what was weird is that the short story really isn't that consistent in tone either, and it's not any more clear. It just has a lot more details to it, that don't really help the central idea. And the same thing with The Electric Grandma. It's like an idea that Ray Bradbury just couldn't let go of, and in each iteration I felt like it's like not that much better than the original idea.
That can, I imagine, be a problem with the writer. It can be frustrating, where you feel like, if I tinker a little bit more, I'm going to get it just perfect, but can't quite nail it. June Vincent was originally cast as Aunt Nedra. The producers were disappointed with the scene. It was reshot with a different director. And apparently, according to the Zickery discussion with the producer, IMDb says just that scene, but the producer kind of hints and suggests that there might have been massive reshoots and that they had a lot of problems like figuring out the tone of this episode and trying to get it to work, and never were that happy with it.
Yeah, I mean, I have a different Twilight Zone trivia book, Martin Grams Jr.'s Unlocking the Door to a Television Classic, and he goes into, as you can imagine, exhaustive detail. I look up the episodes in the index to find them, and usually it's like, like The Lonely, page 522 to 523. This one, it's like page 502 to 614. Like, there's a lot of detail. And I think it is indeed true that they just had tons of problems with the original first draft of the filming, so they had to reshoot more than just the aunt. They had to film other scenes as well. And the director who filmed the first section didn't even want to do it. He didn't like the script. And there's really a lot of interesting detail about the relationship between Ray Bradbury and Serling in the Grams book as well, because when Serling was first starting the Twilight Zone, he really looked up to Bradbury, and in fact there's a reference to Bradbury in Walking Distance. I feel like when,
I think there's maybe There's definitely one there.
Yeah.
I think there might be another Bradbury
Yeah.
reference somewhere in the series.
But they had a good relationship, and Bradbury introduced him to like the stable of writers who would become the Twilight Zone writers, like Richard Matheson and so forth and so on. But Bradbury himself had sort of a weird relationship with Serling. Like he would occasionally accuse Serling of stealing his ideas, but then they would make up again, and he would submit a bunch of ideas for episodes, and Serling wouldn't take any of them. And then he started running out of ideas of his own around the third season, so he picked this one up, but it didn't work out that well. So it was a very there's a lot of ins and outs of the relationship, and if you're interested, definitely pick up the Grahams book.
So this is taken from an interview with Rod Serling from 1975. Ray Bradbury is a very difficult guy to dramatize because that which reads so beautifully on the printed page doesn't fit in the mouth. It fits in the head. And you find characters saying the things that Bradbury's saying, and you say, wait a minute, people don't say that. So it's true, and it's also kind of hilarious, given who's saying it.
No,
but,
but here's the
it's
thing.
a different kind of...
Yeah, I mean, Serling's...
kind of overwritten.
The way that his characters talk is not naturalistic either, but it has a style and a zip to it. You know?
Right.
It doesn't feel more natural when people read it, but
it doesn't...
But it feels...
It doesn't read like prose.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like you're reading a book. It just feels like some super heightened speech that people don't actually use. Like, it's... I don't mean to say it's Tarantino-esque, but there's like the way that Tarantino writes characters isn't really how people speak, but it feels acceptable because it's just a super heightened version of speech.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of more like that.
It's kind of interesting how like both, methods of writing, like both prose and writing for, the screen are really, neither of them are really all that much how people actually talk, but just like certain writers are good at faking it one way and other writers are good at faking it another way. It's interesting.
So Josephine Hutchinson played the grandma. I don't actually have any interesting trivia on her, and she wasn't in any other Twilight Zone episodes.
Cool.
So she's dead to me.
Got it.
David White played Mr. Rogers. That's odd.
Yeah. That feels wrong.
Best known as Larry Tate on Bewitched, he was also in the Twilight Zone episode A World of Difference. Vaughn Taylor played Salesman. He was also in several episodes: Salvador Ross, Time Enough at Last, Still Valley, Incredible World of Horace Ford. This is completely random, but just going through his IMDb page, I noticed he played a character named Thaddeus Whipple in a movie, which... I didn't think other people would use that surname, but I guess it was popular at a certain time.
Yeah, well, Whipple Enterprises,
Yeah. Veronica Cartwright played Anne at age 11. She was born on 4/20, a.k.a. Hitler's birthday.
Right.
And she probably, to me, is best well known as playing Lambert, a.k.a. the other female crew member in the original Alien movie.
Yeah, I didn't...
Like short-haired woman.
Didn't see that, but yeah.
Charles Herbert played Tom at age 12. Direct quote, Charles Herbert was a mildly popular 1950s child actor with a trademark sulky puss and thick furrowed eyebrows who was known for his inquisitive kid besieged by alien beings, including a robot, human fly, and several house-haunting ghosts. And we've got an MST3K connection, so this isn't it, but this is super tenuous, weird MST3K connection. Apparently he was good friends with child actor Susan Gordon, who was the little girl from the Mystery Science Theater episode Tormented. So
weird.
It's kind of funny to think of children actors running in the same circles, starting
network,
starting little phantom planets in the 60s or whatever. But Dana Dillaway played Karen at age 10.
I was going to say
also...
Rilo Kiley, but it's a more indie take.
She was also in One for the Angels. David Armstrong played the Van Driver, which I initially read as who the hell was Van Driver? But
we're skipping over the fact that it was the girl who says Lou a million times. That was it.
Was that the Lou girl?
I kept expecting her to bust out, but Lou, Grandma, Lou.
Yeah, the Van Driver was also in The Trade-Ins and To Serve Man, written by Bradbury, directed by James Sheldon, who directed 6 episodes all told, including It's a Good Life.
Yeah,
and he directed the first portions of the things, and then the reshoots were directed by William Claxton, who also directed a number of episodes. So that kind of is like should just be a huge warning sign. When you see directed by 2 people, you're like, this one had problems.
It's like Alan Smithy and Alan Smithy Jr. So, do we need to talk about Bradbury a bit, or do we assume that because this is a nerd podcast, people will know?
Ray Bradbury obviously is like a giant of the sci-fi world. predominantly in novels, but he also wrote nonfiction. He wrote teleplays. He wrote screenplays. I mean, he just generated a massive body of work. I think most people, probably the most famous thing is Fahrenheit 451, just because it gets assigned in schools a lot. But also
the Martian Chronicles is the basis for a huge amount of science fiction. So
yeah, it's interesting because he definitely worked a lot in television.
Yeah.
And subsequently to this, so he found a way, I guess, to convey his ideas through the medium of television. It's just somehow it didn't click with these two people.
Yeah, I mean, having seen the Electric Grandma, I have to say, I mean, maybe that's an unfair glimpse into his career as a television writer, but it definitely third.
Well, I mean, he had
swing
his
at the
series at some point.
Yeah,
so
that's true. All
must
right,
have
well,
been doing something relatively.
Yeah, he had his own series. All television.
They don't give television shows to.
They don't produce a bad television show.
I am a big Ray Bradbury
fan.
I've read a lot of his work, and so I mean, I can't speak to his television, but definitely a very enjoyable writer and extremely important in American science fiction.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the
inevitable
MST3K.
So we like to find connections between Mystery Science Theater 3000 and the Twilight Zone. John, what do we have this week?
Well, in addition to that shocking find of the friendship between so-and-so and Susan Gordon, Doris Packer played Nedra.
Okay.
She was also in the MST episode Teenage Crime Wave. And Judy Morton played Karen, age 18. She was in the first season episode The Slime People.
The older Karen, yeah. I was really hoping that one of the actresses who provided her arm for the body part in the factory would be an MST3K connection, but I did some Googling. No dice.
Yeah.
What about ratings IMDb-wise?
IMDb gives this episode a 7.3, which I think is probably lower middle.
Yeah.
Kind of lower
middle range.
Probably bottom third-ish.
Yeah. It's sad to say because obviously I love Ray Bradbury too, and it would have been great if such an influential science fiction writer had written a great episode of a classic science fiction TV show. Unfortunately, we cannot say that, truthfully. It's a bad episode. The dialogue is clunky. The logic of it is kind of missing. The tone of it is unsettling in a weird way, I want to say. It's definitely a 3 or something for me. How about you?
I don't know if this is my sentimental episode bias creeping in or something. Or maybe it's just giving Bradbury benefit of the doubt, even though I know he doesn't deserve it. But in my head, this kind of feels very 5-ish, in as much as it feels pretty forgettable to me. We started talking about it, and I'd already forgotten the craziest thing where they're running through just picking limbs up off the wall and throwing them in an incinerator to build a grandma. I feel in a year or two, I'm just going to be what was that Bradbury episode about? I know it wasn't that good, but I can't remember anything about it.
Well, I think it's in the 80s he kind of got it right. It's just called the Electric Grandma. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's how you'll remember it.
I want to give it a 5, but you did a pretty good rundown of, I don't know if there's a thing I can point to where I'm this part was okay. Because it's
just to me,
it's not directed well because it's so disjointed.
Yeah.
The actors, the one bit where the little child actor girl is breaking down, it's not bad child acting, but that doesn't justify a whole episode.
Yeah.
So
I think to me the one moment that really explains why it's not a 5 is when they're having the cathartic moment with the grandma, and she just saved Anne's life. The dialogue just doesn't make any sense. It's she's don't you feel better now because I just told you that your mom died, and here's your voice replayed telling me I'm horrible. It's so muddled, and I feel 5s to me are episodes that kind of make logical sense, have a few flaws here and there, and just kind of pass by. This one I'd say is just, it's a little confounding and nonsensical, and
it doesn't offend me or make me upset like a bad episode should. It just kind of it passed through, and I was that wasn't very good, but it didn't stick. So maybe a 5-. There's something wrong with it. It's probably worse than that, but
maybe you just had a more troubled relationship with your grandma than I did. I don't know.
Probably.
You're don't you love it, Fred? When she's not locking them in a closet?
Yeah.
Sorry. A little close to the bone there. All right. Thank you very much to whoever requested I Sing the Body Electric.
That was Bat Mary.
Thanks,
Thank you very much, Bat Mary.
Yeah, we probably didn't even really mention that it's a quote from Walt Whitman, but we can just let that stand and move on to what we're discussing next week, which is...
Next week we'll be doing The Prime Mover, which was a request from Michael on Twitter and Callan on Facebook. So thank you very much.
Cool. If you want to request an episode or get in touch with us, there are many, 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 many ways to do so. John, what are a few of them?
You could send us an email at twilightpwn, pwn@gmail.com. You can get in touch with us on Twitter at twilightpwn. You can check out our website, twilightpwn.tumblr.com, where we put up pictures and things we find or create related to the episodes we discuss. You could listen to us on Stitcher or TuneIn Radio or several other podcast apps things, or you could subscribe to us in iTunes. If you're in there, if you'd leave us a review, we really appreciate it. Thank you very much to John Arthur Beeman, which may be a real name or may be a reference to a Serling style name. Yeah. It has a very John Arthur Beeman, you know?
Yeah,
so
definitely like a guardian angel name. So this obviously is not Ray Bradbury's finest work. What's your favorite Ray Bradbury book or short story or even screenplay?
I'd say I can't remember the specific story off the top of my head right now, but I think his short story collection, The October Country, was probably the one I remember enjoying the most, like had the most hits out of the number of them. But I will say I was a little let down with Something Wicked This Way Comes. I thought it'd be a little more enjoyable, but
the electric grandma subplot in that is just real drag.
Yeah, but I've pretty much enjoyed, I'd say, like 75% of the short stories of his I've read. I just really like the tone. How about you?
Yeah, I remember reading his short stories when I was a kid and kind of not really knowing who he was or that I was supposed to like him, and they were just very... I don't say this as like a knock, but I think he worked really well for like younger readers. There's like a...
Sure.
I don't know, they're like imaginative, inventive, and they're kind of sentimental and nostalgic in a way that, I don't know, just really appealed to me when I was that age. The Martian Chronicles are really fun. And of course, definitely. Fahrenheit 451 is a classic too, but I think it becomes so poisoned in some ways by being like a school book that I don't remember it as fondly.
Yeah. Cool.
All right.
All right. Well, listeners, check them out.
Cool. Talk to you next week, John.
Later. Thanks.
Cool. All right, talk to you next week, John.
You don't have a question for me?
Well, it's 66 minutes. You have to edit. I thought I'd let you off the hook. Do you want me to think of one right now?
Well...
what's your favorite Ray Bradbury?
There was like 5 minutes.
You want me to start that over?
Yeah, maybe not so hatefully.
Sorry. You want a question out of me, John? I give you my time. All right. So, my... So, John, what's your favorite Ray Bradbury? So what is your favorite? Okay, it's obviously... okay, all right, here we go.